Hey, what's happening? Been a little while since I did one of these videos. I was heading out this morning and inconveniently I got stopped. Had an issue with my car. Small radiator fluid leak. Easily fixed. I think it was part and parcel of a situation I had a couple of weeks ago where I hit a pothole out in Howard County that was a pothole, more like a sinkhole. And it did quite a bit of damage to my car. And it kept me from working for like a week. But because I use my car to Uber these days, that's another whole story. But irregardless, I thought I had fixed everything, and then last week I had a wheel bearing going bad from that same pothole. And then on top of that, this morning I had a radiator leak, and I think that it was leaking because of the jarring hit that I had in this huge pothole, or rather sinkhole, that may have jarred the car so hard that the line on the compression overflow tank cracked the plastic. And it, thank God, hey, I'm gonna tell you something. Thank God I was out driving yesterday all day, 6.5 hours, came home, parked, started the car this morning, and all the lights went off on the dash. No radiator fluid. I go open the hood, there's no radiator fluid in the reservoir tank because it had a crack and it leaked out while it was pressurized. I mean, the car could have broke down on the side of the road. So I want to say thanks be to God for that. But I want to say something to you that is, I felt like the Lord was speaking to me this morning because I had a plan to go out early and start my day, and I ended up having to spend the last several hours getting a part and putting the car back into service, which is fine. I can do those small things. Something larger would have been an auto shop. I've spent enough time talking about that to get to the point that I sat down and just prayed and said, Lord, I'm not going to get angry about this. I'm not sure what's going on there. It's been maybe part of a larger attack, but in the process of all this, the Kingdom Men Ministry has just been bearing fruit. And I would go into particulars, but I don't want to, because some of those things are still in process. But God's been working miraculous wonders. And I heard our one of our pastors, executive pastor, Pastor Andy, preaching on Sunday, talking about money. Now, he was talking about money, and he was saying that while he was preaching, that it wasn't really about money, but it was about your heart and where your heart is. And that when talking about money in the New Testament, Jesus is one of the guys that talks most about it. Well, surely that's important, but that's not even where I'm going. Because in talking about that, Andy said, you know, if God can get you to have your heart right with Him over what you think are riches, He can give you real riches, which are like souls, which are like, man, He can put you in charge of miraculous events. I wish, maybe I'll get one of my buddies here that I've been working with, one of the brothers in Christ, to testify soon. Maybe we'll do a video together and he'll testify about the miracle that God's wrought in his life just in the past 2 weeks. It's been amazing. And I've sat back and said, well, Lord, all you asked me to do was get involved and join you in what you were doing. And that's what I did. But I can't lay claim to what you just did, because this guy beat the odds. And I can't even tell you what it was about. But we're 3 minutes in, and what I want to do is just dispatch this word, because the miraculous is happening. If we put our faith in Jesus, it's not going to be us that's doing anything. It's going to be Jesus that's doing everything through us as we submit and surrender to His lordship. And that's another thing Andy was talking about. So I'm just playing off of that a little bit. But even as I spent time in prayer this morning and reading the Word, the Lord led me right to Genesis 12. It's the call of Abram. Now, it's important. This is important. I thought about this morning. Moses is telling the story here in Genesis, and he's calling him Abram when we know God changed his name to Abraham. But in the story, this hasn't happened yet, and this is part of the call of his life, right? So Abram has left Ur of the Chaldees as God has sent him out. He's been obedient, but he stopped in a place called, let's see, Haran, right? And he stopped there with his father, Terah. He was commanded to leave his family, to leave everything behind and go where the Lord would show him. And they stop in this place called Haran. And Terah, he lives there with Terah and Terah dies. And then God comes again and says, hey, go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land that I will show you. And he makes some significant promises to Abraham. He says, I'm going to make you into a great nation. I will bless you. I'll make your name great. Well, we know Abraham today has a great name. But his name was Abram then, right? There's a process happening here. Pay attention. You'll be a blessing to everyone. He says, I'll bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. That's a promise. So he's given him a nation, a place to put that nation, a blessing, a great name, and now a promise that all the peoples on earth will be blessed through you. That's that blessing. Well, we know that everything good that came from God came through his relationships down the line, through Abraham, through guys like Isaac and Jacob, through Moses, through the people of Israel, right on down to Jesus, to us. There's that blessing that will bless the whole world. Anyway, he tells Abraham, go, and Abraham goes. He takes Lot. Let's see. He was 75 years old. He set out from Haran. He took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, all his possessions, all he had accumulated, and all the people he had acquired in Haran. So Abraham is like a local chieftain there. He's got quite a few people, possessions. And they set out for the land of Canaan, and then they arrived there. We're in verse 8 or 6. Abram traveled through the land as far as the site of the great tree of Moreh at Shechem. At that time, the Canaanites were still in the land. The Lord appeared to Abram and said, to your offspring, I will give this land. That's part of that promise earlier, right? So he built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him. So let's talk about this for a second. Abram arrives at this place between Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim. Now that may sound familiar to you if you go back into Deuteronomy and you see what happened when Joshua was leading them in. There was a covenant renewed between Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim. And Ebal is a desolate, dark, rocky mountain, and it's the place of curses. And Gerizim is a lush, tropical, green-looking mountain. Maybe not tropical, but lush. And that's the place of blessing. And they stood between these two mountains and heard the covenant renewed as they entered the land. The same place, in fact, that God appears to Abram at this great tree of Moreh at Shechem. Now, Moreh means teacher, but it also means divination, and there's some indication that this was an oak grove or a terebinth grove, and these Canaanites would stop there, and they would build altars, and they would worship their deities, their gods, their small g gods. I like to say that, small g god. And Abram stops there, and the Lord appears to him in the midst of all this. Now, take the worst city you could think of in the United States of America, and I don't know, I don't want to name any cities, I've been to quite a few of them, but take the worst, most pagan city in the United States of America where crazy things are happening. And there's a whole lot of worship going on in the streets late at night, in dark alleys. And insane things are happening. People are being murdered, babies are being killed, prostitutes, drugs, fentanyl, people are dying. Take a place like that, where these Canaanites are going into this dark oak grove at night and building altars, pagan altars, and making sacrifices. Oftentimes, the Canaanites like to pass their children through the fire. This is a dark place. This is a place of divination. It's a place of teaching. They would teach each other these dark rites and arts. And Abram stops there because it's a place between these two mountains, the blessing and the curse, that people traveled up through this land. And Abram stops there, and maybe there's other altars there, I don't know. Maybe there's banners hanging in the tree for these gods. Maybe there's poles, and altars and stone tablets indicating what these people worshipped. I don't know. But God appears in the midst of all of that, Yahweh. And he says, I got good news for you, Abram. To your offspring, I'll give this land. And Abram, looking around, says, probably, this land's full of Canaanites. You're going to give me what? These people aren't going to leave? I'm sure that thought went through his head, and he's looking around at all these pagan altars, but here's God in front of him telling him, That promise is good that I made you a long time ago when you left Ur of the Chaldees, that I made again when you left Haran. And now that you've arrived in this land in the midst of these Canaanites who are godless pagans and worship small g gods, I'm here right now. This doesn't scare me. And as a matter of fact, Abram, I'm going to give it all to you. And Abram builds an altar. And it's almost like God's throwing down a gauntlet or a challenge. And he's like, yeah, this is my man. And my man is worshiping me in the midst of the oak grove where the divination takes place. And I'm not scared of all this nonsense and all these little g gods that aren't really gods at all. I'm going to give it all to you, Abram. And then Abram sets out to Bethel. He lives there for a while. Pitches his tent between Bethel and Ai. That's another sermon for another time. But and then he sets out for the Negev, which is a desert place. But Abraham doesn't panic, or Abram. His name hasn't been changed yet. Abram doesn't panic. Abram doesn't freak out. Abram sees God in the midst of his circumstances and his situation. And I'm sure his own eyes that are in the sockets of his head are looking around thinking, well, I don't know how you're going to accomplish that. But he doesn't appear to ask any questions. He builds an altar to Yahweh in the midst of the oak grove, the great tree of Moreh, where all these other gods are worshipped. And he lays a marker down. And he says, God, if that's what you're going to do for me, I'm happy to join you in it. And I'm sure there was fire, and I'm sure there was an offering. Something got its throat slit. And its blood was sprinkled out. And the good parts of it were offered to the Lord. Abram says, doesn't look logical to me. No, he didn't really say that. We don't know what he said. But if I were him, that's what I would have said. Doesn't make any sense. Yahweh, don't know why you look on me with such favor. But whatever you're doing, I'm doing. And he cuts covenant. And he puts a marker in that land that says, it's pretty bold. It says, this belongs to Yahweh. But by the way, it belongs to Abram because Abram's the one offering the sacrifices on it. Man, I hope that blesses you. Because I get up every morning and this was my message to you. And I say this. I pray this every morning. I say, Lord, this is the day the Lord hath made. Therefore I'll rejoice and be glad in it. And then you hit a pothole that's more like a sinkhole, which puts you out of business for a week and carries on into 3 weeks later. But if you say such things, if you lay a marker down and you say, this is the Lord's day, this is the day he's made, therefore I'll rejoice and give thanks, I'll praise him in it, it doesn't matter what happens. Go back to that mark of faith in your life where God made you a promise. And don't let the devil wreck your day. I love you. God bless you. If you've never been out to one of our Wednesday night Bible studies at Difference Makers Church in Damascus, I welcome you. 6:30 p.m. We have a fire monthly. Our next fire is the 21st of March, Friday, 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. It's a place for you as a man to come share your story. Maybe you're going to give testimony. Maybe you're going to hear of the glory of God. Maybe you're going to cut covenant and build an altar. I don't know. I'm going to be there because God just wants me to rub uglies with you, and maybe some sparks are going to fly. And when I say rub uglies, don't take it the wrong way. Our flesh, we're going to bump up against each other and sparks are going to fly. But in the context of that conflict, either the one that's in our heart or the one that's external because our hearts are not right, God's going to show up. If we ask him, he'll be delighted to come and lay a marker in the oak grove at the great tree of Moreh where divination happens. Maybe he'll make you a promise. Love you. God bless you. Bye.